Chapter 1. The night that started it all. City felt heavier than usual that night. The rain had been falling since dusk, turning the pavement into a mirror that reflected every passing light. Emilia Hart pulled her thin jacket closer as she walked out of the clinic. She was exhausted from the late shift, but it was a familiar kind of tired that wrapped around her like a second skin. She crossed the quiet street, thinking only of dinner and sleep. The empty bus stop stood ahead, illuminated by a single flickering lamp. Emilia barely had time to sit before she heard it. A sharp cry. A girl's voice. "Hi, afraid." Emilia froze. The sound came again from the alley beside the closed bakery. Something inside her urged her to run. Instead, her feet carried her forward. In the alley, she found a teenage girl struggling against two men. One held her with a grip that made her shoulders twist. The other covered her mouth. The girl's eyes were wide with terror. She looked too young to understand the cruelty of the world. Emilia's heart pounded. She wanted to scream. She wanted to back away. But training and instinct collided in her chest, pushing her into the scene before fear could swallow her. She picked up a broken wooden plank from beside the trash bins and struck the man holding the girl. The blow landed with a crack. The girl stumbled free. The second man cursed and lunged toward Emilia, but she shouted for help at the top of her lungs. Lights flicked on in a nearby building. The men panicked and fled into the darkness. For a moment the only sound was Emilia's heavy breathing. Rain dripped from her hair and soaked her shoes. She crouched beside the girl who trembled against the wall. "You are safe. You are safe." Emilia repeated the words like a prayer as she checked for injuries. The girl clung to her sleeve, her lips shaking. A sudden roar broke through the night. Several black cars screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley. The doors flew open and men in suits rushed inside. Their presence filled the narrow space with a force that Emilia felt in her bones. At the front was a tall man with dark hair that clung to his forehead from the rain. His eyes were sharp and unreadable. He moved with a calm that felt more dangerous than any raised weapon. The girl cried out and ran into his arms. "Lorenzo," she sobbed. "They tried to take me again." The man held her close, one hand on the back of her head. His expression did not change, but something cold flickered through his gaze. He lifted his eyes to Emilia. For a heartbeat, Emilia could not breathe. His stare felt like a weight pressing against her ribs. He scanned her face as if measuring her intentions and her worth in a single silent moment. One of the suited men stepped forward. "Boss, the girl says this woman saved her." Another figure appeared at the entrance of the alley, older, broader, with an authority that seemed to bend the air around him. His eyes softened when he saw the girl, but hardened again when they turned to Emilia. "Thank you for protecting my daughter," he said. His voice was steady and controlled. "But gratitude aside, your involvement places you in danger. You will come with us until we decide it is safe for you to return home." Emilia blinked. She had expected police. She had expected questions. She had not expected the presence of men who seemed carved out of the underworld itself. "Sir, I just want to go home. I do not want any trouble." "You already have trouble," the older man replied. "Those men saw your face. They belong to people who do not forgive failure. If you walk away now, you will not make it home." Fear wrapped around Emilia's throat. She looked toward the entrance where the cars waited like black shadows. Then she looked at the girl who still clung to her brother. The choice was no longer a choice at all. Lorenzo stepped aside, allowing her to walk past. His eyes never left her. Emilia followed them into the car, the door closing behind her with a finality that made her spine tingle. As the convoy pulled away, Emilia glanced through the window. The street she knew so well faded behind her, swallowed by darkness. Ahead lay a world she had never imagined, a world ruled by secrets and power, a world where she had just stepped into the center without meaning to, and sitting across from her, silent and unreadable, was the man she did not yet know would change everything. Lorenzo DeLuca, the Don's broken son. Chapter 2. The House of Shadows. Emilia had never been inside a place so quiet. The silence inside the DeLuca car felt heavier than the night outside. Every seat smelled faintly of leather and something sharper, something that reminded her of danger. Lorenzo sat across from her, with his arms crossed, his posture still and unreadable. His sister leaned against him, exhausted from fear, yet comforted by his presence. Emilia kept her eyes on her hands, unsure where to look in the presence of people who seemed carved from a world far beyond her reach. No one spoke during the drive. The city lights faded, replaced by the darker outskirts, until the trees grew thick and tall on either side of the road. When the car finally slowed, Emilia lifted her head. The DeLuca mansion rose from the earth like an old fortress. Large stone walls surrounded it, and its tall windows glowed with a warm but guarded light. Men walked the grounds with quiet discipline. Emilia realized they were armed, and the knowledge created a cold shiver across her skin. The car door opened. Lorenzo stepped out first, steadying his sister with a gentle hand on her shoulder. Emilia hesitated, but one of the suited men offered a nod that urged her forward. She stepped out into the night air, which smelled faintly of pine and rain. Inside the mansion, warmth replaced the cold, but the atmosphere remained intense. Every hall was filled with soft golden lights that stretched over polished floors. Family portraits hung on the walls, each face proud and solemn. Emilia felt the weight of the history in every frame. The Don entered the foyer. He stood tall, his dark suit perfectly pressed. His presence seemed to command the room, even when he did not speak. His eyes went to Sofia, ensuring she was unharmed, then returned to Emilia with a seriousness that made her straighten her back. "You did a brave thing tonight," he said. "I owe you a debt, but I must ask something of you in return. Until we are certain that you are no longer in danger, you will remain here. Your safety cannot be guaranteed otherwise." Emilia nodded. She did not trust her voice, so silence was safer. The Don gestured to a maid who stepped forward with a polite smile. "She will show you to your room. You will have anything you need. Until then, rest. Tomorrow we will talk." Emilia followed the maid down a long hallway. Her footsteps echoed softly behind her guide. The mansion felt alive with whispers she could not hear. She sensed secrets in the walls and shadows in the corners, waiting to be revealed. Before the maid pushed open the guest room door, Emilia felt something behind her. She turned. Lorenzo stood halfway down the corridor, watching her with an expression she could not read. His eyes were dark and sharp, yet there was something else there, hidden under the layers of calm. He did not speak. He only studied her, as if trying to understand why a stranger had stepped into his world so fearlessly. Emilia swallowed. She offered a small nod of thanks for bringing her here safely. Lorenzo did not return it. Instead, he turned and walked away, his step soundless. The maid opened the guest room door. Emilia stepped inside and found a space that looked like it belonged in a dream. Soft lighting, a wide bed with clean sheets, a balcony overlooking the trees. It was beautiful, yet she felt like an intruder. When the door closed behind her, Emilia finally allowed herself to sink onto the edge of the bed. Her breath shook, her hands trembled. Everything that had happened replayed in her mind in sharp fragments. The girl's terrified eyes, the men who ran, the roar of the black cars, Lorenzo's cold stare, the Dom's warning, the mansion that now held her in its walls. Nothing about tonight felt real. Emilia lay back and listened to the rain outside. She tried to steady her breathing. She had entered a world she did not understand, a world that felt far too dangerous for someone like her. But the truth settled in her heart with a quiet certainty. There was no going back, and somewhere in this house filled with shadows was the man whose life would soon collide with hers in ways neither of them were ready to face. Chapter 3. A broken prince. Lorenzo DeLuca rarely slept, and tonight was no different. After Sofia had been taken to her room and reassured by the family doctor, he walked alone through the mansion halls. The lights were dim, casting long shadows that stretched across the floor like quiet reminders of the past. He stopped at the window overlooking the courtyard. The rain had eased into a light drizzle. Each drop glimmered on the stone path, It should have been calming. It never was. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Sharp features, cold eyes, a face that looked older than his age, a face that belonged to a man who had lived to many violent nights and carried to many memories he wished he could forget. He closed his eyes. For a moment he was back at the warehouse. The sound of gunfire, the smell of blood, the scream of the woman he had loved. Then silence. A silence that still haunted him in every unguarded moment. His chest tightened with the memory, a familiar ache that had carved itself into his soul. He forced the images away and opened his eyes again. He focused on the present, on control, on the duties that never left him. Footsteps approached from the far end of the hall. The Don appeared, his shoulders heavy with the responsibility he carried. His gaze settled on Lorenzo. "You did well tonight," his father said quietly. "You got there in time." Lorenzo did not reply. He did not need praise. He needed certainty that Sofia was safe. He needed assurance that nothing like this would ever happen again. Even though he knew that was a lie, the Don stepped closer. Her rescue would not have happened without that girl, Emilia. A strange twist of fate. Would you not agree? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. She should not have been involved. No, but she was, his father answered. And now she's in danger because of it. That is why I want you to keep an eye on her while she's here. She knows nothing about our world, and she is easily shaken. She will need guidance. Lorenzo looked away. Why? Maybe because you see threats before anyone else, the Don replied. And because I trust you more than anyone. She is now under our protection, and our protection is your responsibility. Lorenzo's chest filled with a weight he did not want. He gave a silent nod. The Don left without another word. Lorenzo remained by the window, letting the quiet settle around him once more. He knew he would not question his father's orders. He never did. Duty came before everything else, even before the parts of him that still felt broken. He eventually left the hall and made his way upstairs. As he passed the guest wing, a soft light seeped from under a door. Emilia's room. Something made him pause. He did not like her presence in this house. She was too ordinary, too gentle, too untouched by the violence that shaped his world. People like her did not survive long among people like him. And yet she had run into danger earlier without a second thought. That was what unsettled him. He stepped closer to the door. He could hear faint rustling inside. Maybe her moving about. Maybe trying to calm herself after the chaos of the night. For reasons he did not understand. He lifted his hand and rested it on the door frame. A gesture without purpose, as if anchoring himself inside. Emilia sat on the bed, unaware of his presence. She was hugging her knees, staring out toward the balcony, her expression tired but thoughtful. She looked fragile, but there had been nothing fragile about her when she faced those men. It bothered him. He stepped away before she could sense him there. Lorenzo continued down the hall to his room. Once inside, he shut the door and sank into a chair beside the low table. Pictures lay scattered across it. Old ones, Sofia smiling, his father in his youth, his own face before tragedy changed it. And one picture he never moved. The woman he lost. He traced the edge of the photo with his fingertip. He remembered her voice. He remembered her laugh. He remembered the moment he failed to protect her. And now there was another woman under his care. Another woman who had stepped into danger for reasons that made no sense to him. A stranger he did not want to think about. He leaned back and closed his eyes. He had learned long ago that a heart could crack only once before it decided to never open again. He had locked his away. He intended to keep it that way. Emilia Hart had no place in his guarded world, yet somewhere in the house's quiet halls, she slept under the protection he was now expected to provide. And the knowledge sat in his chest, like an unwelcome truth. The world did not care what he wanted. Lorenzo would protect her anyway. It was the only thing he knew how to do. Chapter 4. The girl who does not fear himmening came slowly to the DeLuca mansion. Sunlight filtered through curtains of heavy velvet and settled in soft pools on the polished floors. The house was quiet, not with peace, but with discipline. Every sound felt intentional. Every movement felt watched. Emilia woke to the distant hum of activity outside her door. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The softness of the bed, the tall windows, the silence. Then the memories of the night before returned like a slow turning tide. The attempted kidnapping, the cars, the mansion, Lorenzo's stare. Emilia rubbed her face and pushed herself to her feet. She needed to breathe. She needed to feel something familiar. The balcony offered exactly that. She stepped outside and felt the cool morning air brush against her skin. Beyond the trees, the sky was pale and calm. A soft knock sounded behind her. She turned as a maid entered with a tray of breakfast. The woman set it down gently and gave a small courteous smile. "Mr. Lorenzo has instructed that you should eat and rest for now. You may explore the first floor later if you wish, as long as one of us accompanies you." Emilia blinked. Mr. Lorenzo. He seemed to run this house as much as the Don himself. "Thank you," Emilia whispered. The maid left, and Emilia ate slowly, trying to settle her nerves. When she finished, she gathered her courage and stepped into the hallway. The mansion was almost intimidating in its beauty. Chandeliers glowed softly. Marble floors stretched in long patterns. Everywhere she looked, she found quiet organization. She wandered toward the gallery, where portraits lined the walls. Each face held power. Some held cruelty. Some held sorrow. She paused in front of one painting. A younger Lorenzo stood beside the Don, both dressed in formal suits. Lorenzo's expression in the painting was calm, but there was a spark in his eyes that she had not seen last night. She moved closer, studying the details. She did not hear the footsteps behind her until a voice spoke. "You were very comfortable exploring what does not concern you." Emilia startled and spun around. Lorenzo stood a few steps away, with his arms crossed over his chest. His dark eyes were unreadable. His presence was strong enough to fill the entire gallery. "I am sorry. I did not mean to intrude," Emilia said quietly. "You are a guest," he replied. "But a guest in this house must move carefully. Curiosity is not always harmless." Emilia straightened her posture. Something in his tone irritated her. "I was only looking at the paintings. That is all." Lorenzo stepped closer. His gaze held something sharp, something that tested her. Most people lowered their eyes when he looked at them like that. Emilia did not. She met his stare with steady calm. Even though her heart beat faster, Lorenzo noticed. He tilted his head slightly, as if reassessing her. "You are different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" Samine afraid. "Someone who would keep her distance." Emilia swallowed. Her voice softened. "I was afraid last night. Anyone would be. But curiosity is not the same as fear." For a moment he said nothing. His eyes lingered on her face, on the slight tremble in her fingertips, on the resolve she forced herself to hold. "Come," he said finally. "I need to speak with you." He walked ahead, and Emilia followed. They entered a small sitting room with large windows that filled the space with gentle morning light. Lorenzo closed the door behind them, then faced her. "You will remain here until my father says otherwise," he said. "That means you will listen to the rules. You will stay where you were told to stay. You will not leave the grounds. You will not speak to anyone outside the family without permission. And you will accept protection even if you think you do not need it." Emilia nodded slowly. "This is only temporary." "I know." "Good." His voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "Sofia is still shaken. She does not trust easily. But she does trust you. I want you to spend time with her today. Keep her calm." Emilia's surprise flickered across her face. "I will do anything to help her. She is a sweet girl." She must have been terrified. Lorenzo looked away for a moment, something dark passing through his expression. "She has been terrified before. Last night was not the first time someone tried to take her." Emilia felt the weight of those words settle in her chest. "I am so sorry." Lorenzo cleared his throat, as if he did not want sympathy. "I will check in later." He turned to leave, but Emilia took a small step forward. "Mr. Lorenzo." He paused. "Thank you for keeping me safe last night." His expression shifted, just slightly. A crack in the cold mask, a soft breath. He looked at her, really looked, as if trying to understand why her gratitude felt different from others. Then a noise came from outside. Someone calling for a help, urgent, frantic. Lorenzo moved instantly. Emilia followed. They reached the side room, where Sofia sat trembling in a chair. A bodyguard stood beside her, with concern etched into his features. Sofia clutched her arm and winced in pain. She fell, the guard explained, twisted her wrist. Lorenzo knelt beside his sister. Sofia tried to smile but failed. It hurts. It really hurts. Let me see. Emilia said gently. Lorenzo turned his head toward her. His eyes lingered for a fraction of a second. He did not stop her. Emilia examined the wrist with careful hands. Sofia hissed in pain, but relaxed when Emilia spoke softly. It is only sprained. Nothing serious. I can wrap it. Lorenzo watched every movement she made. His gaze was intense, not in suspicion this time, but in something closer to curiosity. Emilia worked with steady focus, her touch gentle and confident. Sofia visibly relaxed in her care. There, Emilia whispered. You will be fine. Sofia smiled weakly. Thank you. You are really kind. Lorenzo stood. His voice was softer than before. She's good at what she does. Emilia met his eyes. He held her gaze. Neither of them looked away. Something shifted in that quiet moment. Not enough to be called trust, not enough to be called warmth, but enough for the first crack to appear in Lorenzo's carefully built walls. Chapter 5. Lines begin to blur. Days that followed blurred together in a strange rhythm of quiet mornings and tense afternoons. Emilia had begun to settle into the routines of the mansion, but nothing about this world felt normal. Every glance carried weight, every step seemed measured. She learned quickly that the smallest gesture could draw attention, sometimes dangerous attention. Lorenzo's presence was constant. He had been assigned to ensure her safety, which meant following her as she moved from room to room, observing her with a vigilance that made her skin prickle. At first she had felt stifled, but as the hours passed, a strange familiarity began to take root. She could predict his silence, the way his eyes tracked her movements, the subtle way he positioned himself between her and the world. Their interactions began with sharp exchanges. His voice was firm, controlled, always carrying authority. Hers was polite but unafraid. And yet, beneath the surface, there were moments where their walls seemed to slip. A shared laugh over a clumsy mistake, a quiet conversation during the evening meal, a glance that lingered a little too long. One afternoon, Lorenzo brought Emilia to the library. He rarely spent time there, preferring solitude. But today he seemed restless. Sit, he said, motioning to a chair across from him. Emilia did, careful not to speak until he addressed her again. You should not be here, he said after a pause. The mansion is full of rules and dangers that you do not understand. I am here now, she replied softly. I have to adapt. I will follow the rules. He studied her for a long moment, his eyes dark and unreadable. There is more to this than rules, he said finally. There is responsibility, and there is guilt. Emilia tilted her head slightly, curious. Guilt. He shifted uncomfortably, a rare crack in his composure. He told her about Sofia's earlier kidnapping, about the night he had failed to protect her in the past. His voice was quiet, almost distant, as if speaking aloud made the pain more real. I blamed myself, he admitted. Every moment I thought I could have done more. Every time someone hurt her, I felt it in my own chest. Emilia's hands tightened in her lap. She wanted to reach across the table and touch him, to offer comfort, but she hesitated, unsure if he would allow it. Instead she spoke with quiet sincerity. You were there. You saved her. You are doing everything you can now. That counts for more than you know. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, Lorenzo saw something in her that surprised him. Not fear, not weakness, not curiosity. A kind of steady courage that refused to bend. Their conversations became more personal after that. He shared fragments of his past, the pressures of being the Don's son, the moments of grief and anger that had shaped him. Emilia, in turn, spoke of her family, her studies, her quiet determination to help others. Their worlds were different, yet in the small space of the library, They found a strange understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with shades of gold, Lorenzo allowed himself to relax slightly in her presence. He watched her close a book and look up at him with a soft smile. He realized that her presence anchored him, even if he did not fully understand it. He had not expected to feel anything at all for someone like her. And yet, every glance, every word, every quiet moment together chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. Emilia noticed a change too. His silence no longer felt like distance. It felt protective. His sharp gaze no longer felt threatening. It felt attentive. The line between duty and something more began to blur, though neither of them admitted it aloud. Each moment together was charged with unspoken understanding, fragile and delicate, but impossible to ignore, and somewhere deep inside, Lorenzo knew that, for the first time in years, he wanted more than responsibility. He wanted to keep her close, not because he had to, but because he could not imagine letting her go. Chapter 6. The enemy strikes. Calm that had settled over the mansion was fragile, almost deceptive. Emilia had grown accustomed to the routines, the quiet corridors, and the watchful eyes, but she knew the world outside was dangerous. Tonight, that danger arrived at the doorstep. It began with a knock at the service entrance, faint but deliberate. One of the bodyguards answered, and a brief conversation followed. Emilia, curious, stepped closer. The words she heard made her blood run cold. "They are looking for her," the guard said. "They believe she knows something." Before she could ask more, Lorenzo appeared at her side. His presence was immediate and protective. His eyes narrowed, dark and alert. "We move now," he said. Emilia nodded, heart racing. She had followed him into danger before in her mind, but this time it was real. They reached a safe house several miles from the mansion. The ride was tense and silent. Lorenzo drove with precision, aware of every turn, every potential shadow. Emilia sat beside him, gripping the edge of her seat. She could feel the pulse of fear in her chest, but also a strange thrill, being so close to him in this moment. The safe house was simple but secure. Thick doors, reinforced windows, and cameras at every corner. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the DeLuca mansion, but it would do for now. Lorenzo instructed her to stay in the small sitting room while he surveyed the perimeter. She watched him move with a grace and intensity that was almost hypnotic. She wanted to speak, to ask if he was okay, but she could not find the words. Instead, she waited, silent and tense. The first night in the safe house was the longest she had ever experienced. Rain tapped against the windows, and the wind rattled the walls. Every sound outside set her nerves on edge. She tried to read, to distract herself, but her thoughts kept drifting to Lorenzo. He returned late, silent as always. She noticed his hands were trembling slightly, his jaw tight, though he did not admit it. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. "I am fine," he replied. But the lie in his tone was clear. He never gave her false comfort, yet he never spoke of his fear either. Hours passed. Storm clouds gathered outside, and lightning briefly illuminated the room. The sudden flash of light revealed Lorenzo sitting beside her on the floor, his head bowed, his hands clasped tightly together. Emilia hesitated. Then she reached out. Her hand found his shoulder, steadying him without words. He did not pull away. For the first time in years, Lorenzo allowed himself to tremble, not from weakness, but from the exhaustion of holding in everything for so long. His shoulders shook as the storm outside mirrored the storm within him. Emilia held him, silent and firm, her presence a small beacon in the darkness. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. The storm passed slowly, and when it ended, the quiet left them both changed. Later, when the rain ceased, Lorenzo sat back on his heels and finally met her gaze. His eyes were raw, vulnerable, and for a fleeting moment, "Human. We cannot afford weakness," he said quietly. "Not now, I know," she replied. "But it is okay to feel, Lorenzo. Even you." A long pause followed. Then he leaned slightly toward her. Their faces were inches apart. The tension between them was almost unbearable. They breathed in unison. Their lips hovered, And then, in a fleeting second, the almost kiss ended as he pulled back, leaving both shaken, aware of something neither could name. The night ended with no answers, only questions. The enemy had made its move, and Lorenzo knew this was only the beginning. Yet amid the fear and danger, a fragile bond had formed, one built on trust, courage, and the quiet understanding that they were no longer alone in the storm. And somewhere in the shadows of the safe house, Lorenzo realized that protecting Emilia was no longer only about duty. It was about something deeper, something he could not yet put into words. Chapter 7. A love born in danger's safe house had become their fragile world. Outside, the city continued its pulse of violence and betrayal, but inside, there was a quiet they could almost call their own. Every corner, every shadow, carried a sense of vigilance, but also something else, something softer, something they could not yet name. Lorenzo and Emilia spent the days in close proximity, forced by circumstance, but slowly learning the contours of each other's presence. He watched her carefully, noting the way her fingers lingered on books, the subtle ways she noticed small details around the room. She observed him too, often silently, her eyes tracing the lines of tension in his shoulders, the faint scars on his hands, the moments when his gaze softened when he thought no one was watching. One evening, Lorenzo allowed himself to speak more than usual. He recounted moments from his past, things no one else in the family had known, how the city had tried to break him, how the loss of the woman he had loved still haunted him, how every choice had been weighed against impossible expectations. Emilia listened, not interrupting, offering only a quiet presence that spoke louder than words. Her hand brushed against his as she handed him a glass of water, and he did not pull away. For a long time, they sat together in silence, the weight of unspoken confessions heavy in the room. The night deepened, and the storm outside returned, rattling the safe house windows. Thunder rolled in the distance, yet the tension between them was closer, more intimate than any storm. Emilia's heart beat faster when Lorenzo moved slightly closer, his arm brushing against hers. Their eyes met, and there was no need for words. Finally, he spoke. "I have never trusted anyone like this before, not in all my life." Emilia's breath caught. "What do you mean you?" he said quietly. "You are the first person who has faced danger alongside me and not flinched. The first person who sees me without fear or judgment." Her fingers reached for his hand. She felt the warmth of his skin beneath hers. Lorenzo did not move, did not resist. He let her hold him as the rain hammered the windows. Then, without warning, the restraint they had maintained for so long broke. Their lips met in a desperate, passionate kiss, unplanned but inevitable. It was both comforting and consuming. The world outside the safe house disappeared. Every fear, every threat, every danger faded for a moment that felt suspended in time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, reality returned with cruel clarity. The Don's rules, the danger outside, the enemies who hunted them. Yet the look they exchanged was filled with something stronger than fear or duty. It was something that neither wanted to name, yet both felt in every heartbeat. But happiness was fragile. The next morning, the Don himself arrived at the safe house, his expression a mixture of concern and command. He had learned of the closeness between Lorenzo and Emilia, and his disapproval was immediate. "This cannot continue," he said, voice low but firm. "She is under our protection. You will maintain distance. You are not to become attached. You are not to make her vulnerable." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to demand that the Don understand, but he remained silent. His eyes found Emilia's across the room, and he knew she understood. He would protect her, no matter the cost. Even if it meant defying his father's orders. Emilia met the Don's gaze with quiet determination. She would not be intimidated, and she would not hide the truth of what she felt. That quiet courage, that refusal to bend, only made Lorenzo's feelings for her deepen. By nightfall, they were alone again in the safe house. Words were unnecessary. Their hands found each other, their bodies close, their hearts aligned in a way that could no longer be denied. Love had been born in danger, fierce, raw, and undeniable. And though the world outside would try to tear them apart, for now, they had each other. Chapter 8. Betrayal in the bloodline F. Quiet they had found in the safe house was shattered in an instant. A message arrived, delivered by one of the trusted men from the mansion. Lorenzo's eyes darkened as he read it. His jaw tightened, his fists clenching. Emilia noticed the change immediately. "What is it?" she asked, concern threading her voice. He looked at her, his expression tight. "Someone has betrayed us," he said. "Someone inside the family has revealed your location to the enemy." Emilia's stomach sank. Betrayal was worse than attack. It was intimate, personal, and it made the danger feel impossible to escape. Lorenzo moved swiftly, his mind already racing through every possibility. He gave instructions to the bodyguards, his voice calm but edged with fury. They would have to act fast, or the consequences could be deadly. Before they could act, a message arrived from the enemy. It was brief, precise, and chilling. They had taken her. They would use her to get to him. Emilia felt her knees weaken. She could not believe this was happening. She had trusted the safe house, trusted Lorenzo, trusted the people who protected her. And now that trust had been shattered, Lorenzo saw her fear and took her hands in his. His touch was firm, grounding. "Do not panic," he said. "I will get you back. I promise." There was no hesitation in his words, no uncertainty. His voice was filled with the kind of controlled rage that came from someone who had known loss and refused to experience it again. The world outside had become a battlefield, and Emilia had become the most dangerous pawn. Lorenzo acted quickly. He contacted allies, mapped every possible route, and prepared for the confrontation that he knew would come. There was no room for error, no time for hesitation. Every decision could mean life or death. Emilia stayed close to him as he worked, watching him transform into a force she had never seen before. The man who had seemed cold and unreachable in the mansion now burned with a singular purpose. Every muscle, every movement was focused on saving her. As the hours passed, the tension between them remained taut. Emilia wanted to speak, to offer comfort, to remind him she was there. But she also understood the weight of his rage. It was not something to be interrupted. Finally, Lorenzo turned to her, his dark eyes blazing. "I cannot promise that nothing will happen," he said quietly. "But I will not fail. Not again." The words were a vow, a declaration, and a warning all at once. Emilia felt a mixture of fear and awe. This man, who had built walls around himself for so long, had opened them for her. Night fell, and the city outside became a canvas of shadows and threats. Lorenzo moved with purpose, every plan and movement calculated. He would not allow betrayal to win. He would not allow the enemy to take what he valued most. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Emilia realized the truth that had been forming quietly in her heart. She trusted him completely, and more than that, she knew she loved him. Lorenzo felt it too. It was no longer just duty. It was personal. It was everything he had refused to let himself feel for years. And now, that love would drive him to confront every danger, every enemy, and every shadow that threatened them. The night stretched ahead, full of peril, but also full of determination. Betrayal had struck, but it had only strengthened the bond between them. Lorenzo would find her, and nothing would stop him. Chapter 9. Fire and Rescue. The city was quiet when Lorenzo moved through the streets, but the calm was a lie. Every shadow held the possibility of attack. Every street corner could hide an enemy. He drove with precision, the car moving swiftly but controlled, his mind focused entirely on Emilia. She had been taken from him, and the thought ignited a fury he had not felt in years. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Nothing else mattered. Nothing except finding her and bringing her back safely. The trail led him to an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city. Its walls were crumbling, the windows dark and broken. A sense of familiarity struck him immediately. This was a place where he had faced betrayal before, where he had lost people he cared about. He parked a short distance away and surveyed the building. The enemy was inside, and Emilia's voice would not call out. She had been trained to stay quiet under threat. He had no time to wait. Lorenzo moved with calculated speed, entering the warehouse through a side door. Every step was measured, every sound controlled. He encountered guards and neutralized them with silent precision. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear. Finally, he found her. Emilia was bound, but unharmed. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and she tried to speak, but he silenced her with a finger against her lips. "Do not speak," he whispered. "I am here." He worked quickly to free her, cutting the ropes and checking her for injuries. She was trembling, but she leaned against him without hesitation. Her trust was complete, and it filled him with a fierce protectiveness he could not contain. Suddenly, a man stepped out from the shadows, the very figure responsible for his past trauma. The man smiled, confident, unaware of the storm that was about to descend. Lorenzo faced him, every muscle tensed, every instinct alert. This man had taken too much from him already. There would be no mercy tonight. The confrontation was brutal. Lorenzo moved with the force of someone who had nothing to lose, his anger fueling each strike. The enemy fought back, but he had underestimated the intensity born from years of pain and loss. Emilia watched, heart pounding, as Lorenzo confronted the man. He moved not only to defeat him but to protect her, to ensure that she would never be hurt again. When the fight ended, the enemy lay defeated, and Lorenzo turned to Emilia, his chest heaving, sweat and rain mixing on his skin. He held her close, her small frame against his, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly, his voice rough with emotion. "No," she replied. "Only scared." He held her tighter. That fear would never return, he thought. Not if he could help it. But he was not unscathed. In the struggle, he had been injured. A deep cut along his shoulder burned, and he winced as he felt the pain. Emilia immediately pressed her hands to him, applying pressure, her voice steady. "You are hurt," she said. "Let me help." He allowed her, though it pained him to be vulnerable. She worked with careful hands, her touch gentle, her presence grounding him in a way he had not experienced before. When the wound was tended, he finally admitted the truth he had kept from everyone, even himself. "I do not want to be the Don's perfect heir," he whispered. "I want a life shaped by love, by you." Emilia looked into his eyes and smiled softly. That was all he needed. They had survived the night, faced danger together, and come out stronger. The city outside remained dangerous, but in that small space, in the quiet aftermath of fire and fury, Lorenzo and Emilia found a moment of peace, a moment that promised a future they would fight to protect together. And for the first time, he believed that love could heal even the deepest scars. Chapter 10. A Hart-Hilleth mansion was quiet when Lorenzo and Emilia returned. The battle had ended, but the echoes of violence lingered in the hallways. Every corner seemed to hum with memory, yet there was also a sense of calm, a fragile peace that had been earned through fire and fear. The Don stood in the foyer, his expression unreadable. For the first time, Lorenzo felt he could look his father in the eye without the weight of expectation pressing down on him. "He did well," the Don said slowly. "You risked everything for her, for love. That is a choice I cannot deny." Lorenzo exhaled, relief flooding through him. The unspoken tension between duty and desire was lifted. Emilia's hand found his, and he held it tightly. A silent affirmation that they were together and nothing could break that bond now. Sofia ran into their arms, laughter and tears mixing as she clung to her brother and Emilia. The trauma of the past weeks had left its mark, but in this moment, healing felt possible. The traitor in the family had been dealt with swiftly. Justice had been served, and the house felt lighter for it. Yet Lorenzo knew the scars would not disappear entirely. He had seen too much, lost too much, to ever be the same. But with Emilia by his side, he felt a new strength. Her presence had brought light into the shadows of his life. Her courage, kindness, and unwavering loyalty had reminded him that life could be more than obligation and pain. Later, in the quiet of his room, Lorenzo looked at her. His voice was soft but certain. "I do not want to be the Don's perfect son anymore. I want to live for us, for our future." Emilia smiled, leaning into him. "That is exactly what I want too." The mansion, once a place of fear and duty, now felt like a home. The halls no longer carried only shadows, but the possibility of warmth, of laughter, of life. Lorenzo stepped out into the balcony, holding Emilia close. The city stretched beneath them, dangerous and alive, but he no longer felt trapped by it. He had chosen his path, and he would walk it with the woman he loved. The sun began to rise, painting the sky with soft golds and pinks. For the first time in years, Lorenzo felt hope, not obligation. For the first time, he believed that love could heal even the most broken heart. Together, they faced the future, scarred but unbroken, battered but not defeated. And for the first time, they allowed themselves to dream of peace, of happiness, and of a life built from the strength of their bond. The world could wait, for now they had each other, and that was enough.